Good morning to everyone. My name is Annabel Gonzalez, and I'm honored to moderate this distinguished panel on a very timely subject titled Inclusive Policies, Global Impact, Ensuring the Best Use of Special and Differential Treatment. This discussion is particularly relevant in light of the recent WTO agreement where ministers adopted a decision to enhance the use of special and differential provisions in the organization. This is, of course, also a topic that is extremely relevant to many, if not all, members of this House. So we have a great panel today that will bring different perspectives on trade and development through the lens of digital trade, food exports, textile and apparel, and more. So let me introduce our panel, starting from the right, Her Excellency Ornesh Walrond, Minister of Tourism, Industry, and Commerce from the government of Guyana. We also have Ambassador Adamu Abdulhamid, Ambassador of Nigeria, who is also sitting here for Her Excellency Doris Usoka Anite, Minister of Industry, Trade, and Investment of Nigeria. We also have His Excellency Hector Marroquin, Vice Minister of Foreign Trade and Economic Integration of Guatemala. And last but not least, we have Dr. Indermit Gill, Chief Economist at the World Bank Group. So I'll go to our panelists in a moment with a couple of questions, and time permitting, I will also like to come to you in the audience. So get ready with your short questions just in case. So policymakers constantly strive to have many, if not all, benefit from trade, recognizing its pivotal role in improving lives across various dimensions. To set the stage, let me highlight some of the points made by the WTO flagship report that was launched just a couple of days ago. At the country level, developing nations are increasingly participating in trade, making significant efforts to integrate into global markets by lowering barriers. In the last 3 decades, low and middle-income countries have doubled their share of global exports, now accounting for 30%. At the firm level, the international fragmentation of production and digital transformation provide SMEs with opportunities to participate in global value chains. And this participation allows for specialization in specific production segments, access to competitively priced imports, and enhanced technology spillovers. We also know that trade empowers women by increasing their participation in the labor force. Exporting firms tend to employ a higher percentage of women compared to non-exporting firms. And in developing economies, women constitute 33% of the workforce in exporting firms, compared to 24% in non-exporting firms. Additionally, businesses involved in GBCs or with foreign investors employ on average between 11 and 12% more women. And it also creates better job prospects for both women and men. For instance, booming exports of goods like transport equipment and machinery have drawn more Mexican workers into formal employment, providing them with job security and benefits previously lacking. Despite its potential, trade faces obstacles that can hinder its inclusivity. Addressing these barriers is crucial, especially in today's world, marked by seismic shocks like climate change, rapid technological change, and geopolitical tensions. And in this context, the WTO continues to play a crucial role in simplifying and accelerating trade and investment to foster greater inclusivity. And of course, it stands to do more. Today, I look forward to discussing how we can further revise and reform special and differential treatment, that is the treatment of developing countries in the WTO, leveraging the insights of our excellent panel. So to start with, let me please go to the Ambassador of Nigeria and ask her the following. So exports of digitally delivered services in Africa are rapidly accelerating, growing by 8% in 2022, which is amazing, double the global rate, to nearly $33 billion US. These services are outpacing trading goods and services. In Nigeria, the growth in this sector since 2015 has been close to 4% annually, surpassing the global average, particularly in business process outsourcing and IT services. Additionally, emerging e-commerce platforms in Nigeria and in Africa more broadly are creating significant opportunities for women, SMEs, and young people. Now, this is, of course, no accident. Nigeria has made substantial efforts to foster digital trade as a driver of economic growth, with a national digital economic policy and strategy, with your very active participation in the negotiations here in the WTO on digital trade, and of course with initiatives of regional nature like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So, Ambassador, in light of this, what do you see are the key challenges that developing countries like Nigeria face in fully benefiting from digital trade? And how do you think special and differential treatment provisions complement other regional or plurilateral initiatives to enhance Nigeria's integration into the global digital economy?
Thank you, the moderator. It is a practical reality globally that digital trade is taking a center stage. And it is on that basis that in most of the fora, and particularly in the WTO, members have been pushing and agitating for global digital trade. Because with digital trade, of course, the global community and the business community stand to benefit more. It is still on that basis that Nigeria, in its own thinking and vision, felt that the e-commerce has come at the right time. And of course, being one of the joint initiative, Nigeria has been one of the members that key into that initiative. Now, looking at the digital trade, and for developing countries to really benefit from that digital trade or to take advantage of the digital trade to develop as their counterpart in the developed world, there has to be availability of certain factors, which those factors are responsible for the setback in benefiting from those digital trading activities. One of the factors is the large gap in digital connectivity and infrastructure. There is no fact for the fact that developing countries, and in particularly Africa and Nigeria, has those challenges of advanced technologies and infrastructure to be able to fully take advantage of the digital trade. Now, lack of effective program for technology transfer and equitable access for new technology. Well, in Nigeria, we have designed policies that would like to take advantage of the digital trade. But the technology transfer, which over the time here in the WTO, we as Nigeria and other developing countries have been calling for the need for transfer of technology to our countries like ours, so that we can take advantage of that and we could also develop in terms of trade like our developed counterpart. Now, inequitable access to big digital platforms and poor visibility of developing countries. Like yesterday, I attended a program where we discussed on artificial intelligence. And we discussed a lot, and we pinpointed that, of course, it is a good initiative, but due to lack of those technology and equipment, as well as infrastructure, could not be able to give us that advantage to play at a par with our counterpart. Now, when you talk of the special and differential treatment, of course, it's key for developing countries to come on board, to be able to acquire the enough capacity, the skills to be able to take advantage of the digital trade. So in that case, special and differential treatment in that respect is key because there must be need for provision of technical assistance and capacity building to those countries. There must be need for transfer of technology. There must be need for any other support that could be able to support the developing countries, and in particularly Africa and Nigeria, to have that skills and the capacity and the technology to be able to take full advantage of the digital trade and perform effectively like their counterpart, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Abdulhamid. So you referred to interesting points, great opportunity in the digital world, but important, I would say, hardware and software elements to allow countries to take advantage of this opportunity. So thank you very much. So we see one communicator between trade and development is regional trade. Now, digital trade. Another important component of this connection of trade and development is food, global food, and in particular, the role of agriculture in driving development. Now, we have seen that global food markets have faced important shocks, from war to climate change to all sorts of logistical disruptions. But despite these challenges, efforts to maintain trade flows have underscored the crucial role of trade in enhancing agricultural productivity and in ensuring food security. Now, Minister Onej Walrond, I want to turn to you now because Guyana's approach to food security has received significant recognition, with efforts focused on improving infrastructure, investing in sustainable farming practices, and fostering regional cooperation development. We have seen, for example, the International Fund for Agricultural Development recognize the work that is being done in Guyana. So in thinking of this effort, how do you see, or how has Guyana approached the issue of trade liberalization and market access, and how has this benefited your agricultural sector? And from the perspective of a small country, small not in territory, but in population, how does Guyana view the WTO's approach to export restrictions on food? And are there reform improvements in special and differential treatment that could help ensure better access for key food staples from major producers?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let me recognize the Director General, fellow panelists, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. As a proud founding member, Guyana extends its heartfelt congratulations to the World Trade Organization on the occasion of its 30th anniversary. And we are excited about our continued engagement with this esteemed body as we look ahead to the next 30 years and beyond. Guyana reaffirms its unwavering support for the WTO's mission of fostering open markets and promoting fair, inclusive global trade. In alignment with this vision, Guyana has consistently tailored our policies to embrace and advance these principles, ensuring that trade remains a powerful driver of economic growth and development. With respect to how Guyana's approach to trade liberalization and market access has benefited its agricultural sector, through its commitment to trade liberalization and open market access, Guyana has unlocked significant opportunities for its agricultural sector. By expanding access to diverse international markets, particularly in the Caribbean, North America, and Europe, the country has successfully positioned its agricultural products on the global stage. Guyana's Investment Act of 2024, implemented by the Guyana Office of Investment, GoInvest, has further strengthened this strategy by fostering a favorable environment that attracts foreign direct investment into the agricultural sector. This has enhanced the sector's growth potential, enabling the influx of capital, technology, and sustainable practices. Overall, our approach has spurred growth, enhanced competitiveness, fostered innovation, created employment and opportunities, and promoted sustainability within the sector, solidifying its position as a key pillar of Guyana's economy. With respect to the strategies and policies that has been most effective for Guyana's agriculture sector, Guyana's agriculture sector has benefited from a range of strategies and policies. One key initiative was the Jagdeo Initiative, introduced in 2022 by then-President Barra Jagdeo. This strategy was aimed at removing constraints hindering agricultural development in CARICOM, focusing on production, trade, transportation, manufacturing, and financing. The Jagdeo Initiative aimed to reposition CARICOM's agricultural policies and strategies by addressing food security challenges, reducing the Caribbean's dependence on food imports, and integrating with past regional efforts to develop a common agricultural policy with objectives similar in some respects to the common policy implemented in Europe just over 6 decades ago. The initiative recognized that the agriculture sector was neither providing for food security nor earning the foreign exchange to cover the Caribbean's growing food import bill. It therefore sought to remove constraints in production, trade policies, transportation, manufacturing, and financing to secure food and nutrition security and intercountry trade within CARICOM. Inevitably, we encounter challenges as a region in implementing the Jagdeo Initiative. One persistent challenge has been lack of financial resources. Another has been entrenched interests which governments anywhere in the world encounter when embarking on transformative agendas which disrupt the status quo. However, despite these and other challenges, we have seen tangible gains. For example, we have seen remarkable growth in rice production. In 2010, our annual production of rice was 250,000 tons per year. Guyana is expected to produce more than 700 tons of rice. Such gains have come from investing in research and innovation, including a rice research laboratory, which has produced 60 new seed varieties in the past 20 years. We have also invested in other agricultural technologies, such as labs for tissue culture, plant production, animal health, and soil testing. Building on the initiative in 2020, President Irfan Ali launched the 25 by 2025 initiative, which set an ambitious goal to reduce CARICOM's food import bill by 25% by 2025. This initiative focused on enhancing agricultural production through increased efficiency, the introduction of climate-resilient and high-value crops, and the modernization of key infrastructure. It emphasizes strengthening financing mechanisms for farmers and agribusinesses, supporting innovation and technology adoption, and improving market access. It recognizes the need to expand regional air and sea transportation links within CARICOM. Guyana has already made significant strides towards achieving this goal, taking a leadership role in food and nutrition security across the region through substantial national investments in agriculture. Between 2021 and 2024, Guyana tripled its budgetary allocations for agriculture infrastructure development, such as pump stations and new drainage and irrigation systems. And we've already seen a 15% reduction in extra-regional imports as a result of these and other efforts. Despite our progress, we continue to confront challenges. Unpredictable climate shifts and increased pest activities have forced our country to reassess its adaptation and mitigation strategies. But in response, we have made significant progress in introducing climate-resilient crops and prioritizing infrastructure designed to withstand the impacts of climate change. Moreover, Guyana's agricultural policies emphasize inclusive participation in agricultural activities. This is being pursued through our deliberate efforts to engage young people and women in the sector. We encourage women and youth to take advantage of our investments in non-traditional agriculture and our development of infrastructure such as shade houses. Sustainable livestock production has been a key priority. supported by advancements in research and technical capacities. These efforts have led to significant increases in poultry, beef, and mutton output, as well as successful initiation of meaningful dairy production. Ghana is working to diversify its agricultural output by increasing the production of crops like corn, soya, millet, onions, garlic, and potatoes to help reduce our import bill and assist other CARICOM countries to reduce their reliance on imports by 2030. We aim to eliminate import costs for stock feed by achieving self-sufficiency in corn and soya by 2026 and becoming a regional exporter by 2027. Overall, Guyana is committed to continuing our efforts to enhance food security, strengthen resilience to climate change, and expand opportunities for global and regional trade, particularly in the agricultural sector. Guyana views the WTO's approach to export restrictions on food as essential for maintaining global food security and promoting fair trade practices. We support efforts to prevent unjustified export restrictions, which can cause price volatility and supply shortages, particularly in developing nations. Guyana advocates for greater transparency and predictability in export policies to ensure stability in global food supply chain and equitable access to critical food resources. For a long time, Guyana has been a leader within the WTO on key issues such as special and differential treatment, SDTs. In July 2024, the Honorable Clement Rohi, then Minister of Foreign Trade, hosted a G90 mini ministerial conference in Guyana, stressing the need for WTO members to address the unique challenges of developing countries. Almost 2 decades later, these issues remain critical, especially given today's challenges. Guyana emphasizes the need for a fairer SDTs regime, which should address not only tariff reduction, but also non-tariff barriers that limit market access for developing countries. Small island developing states like Guyana and other Caribbean nations, which are highly vulnerable to climate events, need stronger support to recover from disasters, just like the recent Hurricane Beryl, which had devastating effects on food security and the nutrition of vulnerable populations. SDTs should provide exemptions from export restrictions imposed by major producers, ensuring access to key food staples during global supply crisis. Strengthening the SDTs provision would also enhance agricultural capacity building in developing nations, promoting self-sufficiency and reducing dependency on food imports. Additionally, improved SDT measures could lower trade barriers and transaction costs, making it easier for these countries to access essential food supplies and better integrate into the global food market. Madam Moderator, as we celebrate this organization's 30th anniversary and look ahead to the next 3 decades, let us commit to doing better for the majority of members in the shortest possible term. We must reaffirm our dedication to equitable and transparent trade policies that support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and safeguard global food and nutrition security. Guyana remains deeply committed to advancing agricultural development through trade liberalization, resilient building, and innovation. And as we continue our engagement with the WTO and international partners, we aim to ensure that trade policies foster growth, reduce inequalities, and promote a fair and resilient global food system for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks, Minister. Before we were coming here, I was mentioning to the Minister that I was in Georgetown, in Guyana, earlier this year, and it's so impressive to see what is happening on the ground in your country. And listening to you here, I can understand the importance of open regional and global markets and important complementary domestic policies to support and invest in production, in trade, in transport, manufacturing, financing. So no wonder that Guyana is doing so well in this area of agricultural food exports. So thank you very much for your words. Let me now turn to another dimension that is also very important in this nexus between trade and development, and that is textiles and apparel. And with us here is Vice Minister Hector Marroquin. Vice Minister, we know that the apparel sector's significance in Guatemala highlights that trade can positively impact women by creating jobs. As the country's largest exporter, the apparel and textile industry accounts for 14% of total exports and 9% of GDP, employing almost 200,000 people in Guatemala. I may be, those statistics may be outdated, and Guatemala leverages its proximity to major markets like the U.S. And is well positioned to further growth. Again, we were also discussing new investments that continue to come to Guatemala in this sector. And we know that high-level participation of women is not only important from the perspective of employment, but it also impacts other aspects of women's and family lives, including education. So, Vice Minister, what role can special and differential treatment provisions play in Guatemala's strategy to promote garment exports? And which areas could be improved, particularly regarding international production standards and workplace safety?
Well, thank you, Madam Moderator. Please let me join Guyana's celebration of the 30th anniversary of the WTO. Of course, it's such an honor for the Republic of Guatemala to be part of this public forum, and a huge responsibility to being on stage and sharing some of the experiences we've had. And if you would allow me, Madam Moderator, I would rather do this in Spanish, in my mother tongue. To answer your question, efectivamente, para la República de Guatemala, las exportaciones y el sector de vestuario y textiles de la confección son definitivamente un sector de mucha importancia para el país. En los últimos años, en los últimos 5 años, las exportaciones del sector de vestuario y textil han sido las exportaciones líderes en el país, lo que nos va separando del modelo tradicional de exportaciones netamente agrícolas que teníamos registradas históricamente. Como bien mencionaba la señora moderadora, efectivamente el involucramiento de las mujeres ha sido bastante importante y esto tiene un componente no únicamente económico, sino también social. Y es que las mujeres en mi país, debido a una serie de factores, entre ellos la migración, han quedado como jefas de familia, como jefas de hogar y necesitan alternativas de empleo. Y el sector de vestuario y textiles ha sido uno de los sectores en los que han podido encontrar oportunidades de empleo digno. Para compartir con ustedes una cifra, de hecho, el 46% de la fuerza laboral en el sector de vestuario y textil son las mujeres. Y estamos hablando de mujeres jóvenes, en muchos casos mujeres de menos de 30 años y en algunos casos mujeres de menos de 25 años. Guatemala produce una amplia gama de productos de vestuario y textiles, entre ellos hilos, hilazas, textiles y prendas de vestir de alta calidad para diferentes nichos de mercados, desde ropa informal, ropa para niños, ropa deportiva, uniformes y ropa de trabajo. Participamos como país en diversas etapas de la cadena de valor, como materia prima, hilatura, tejeduría, acabados en tela, confección, acabados y servicios conexos como laboratorios textiles. Si bien estamos participando en diferentes tipos de actividades dentro de la cadena de valor del sector, hay todavía una importante oportunidad para trabajar en la diversificación de la producción en Guatemala. Estos productos con mayor valor agregado, como por ejemplo productos sintéticos con aplicación de tecnologías que pueden llegar incluso a diversificar la producción en áreas como los accesorios. Con esto en mente, regreso a la pregunta de qué podría aportar el trato especial y diferenciado. Específicamente, nosotros identificamos que puede aportar en aquellas medidas que busquen aumentar las oportunidades comerciales de los países y sobre todo también algo muy importante para países productores como la República de Guatemala, la asistencia técnica a fin de que se ayude a los países en desarrollo en el cumplimiento de las diferentes medidas y la aplicación de normas técnicas. En primer lugar, y es aquí donde podemos destacar el intercambio de experiencias entre los miembros en los diferentes comités que surgen en el seno de la OMC, que se brindan oportunidades para conocer experiencias de otros miembros y cómo nosotros podemos entonces tomar diferentes elementos y buscar replicar esas experiencias en nuestros países. Esto también nos ayuda a poder definir modelos propios que nos permitan ordenar nuestro sistema interno de regulaciones que son necesarias. Y aquí es donde particularmente nosotros vemos una necesidad de contar con trato especial y diferenciado, y no para buscar excepciones o para buscar exclusiones dentro de nuestros compromisos con nuestros socios comerciales alrededor del mundo. No, sino es para poder tener el tiempo suficiente para poder llevar nuestra regulación y nuestra legislación interna al cumplimiento de estos estándares que van surgiendo como producto de las mismas negociaciones en el ámbito multilateral. Luego tenemos la parte segunda de la pregunta, cómo mantener los estándares industriales de producción, ambientales y laborales, que bueno, hoy todos sabemos que el cumplimiento y sobre todo las normas son dictadas por diferentes organismos, ¿verdad?, internacionales, pero también como poco a poco todos estos estándares se van volviendo requerimientos de los mercados hacia donde nuestras empresas exportadoras están vendiendo sus productos. Esto quiere decir que nosotros indudablemente tendremos que cumplir con estos nuevos requisitos, con estas nuevas normativas y de nuevo el trato especial y diferenciado, sobre todo en términos de la asistencia técnica que países en vías de desarrollo, las pequeñas economías, pueden recibir, ayuda a que nosotros podamos estar en capacidad de cumplir con esos requerimientos y esa nueva normativa. De nuevo, y aquí sí quiero hacer el énfasis, no buscamos países como la República de Guatemala, con estos mecanismos de trato especial y diferenciado, exclusiones. No, lo que necesitamos es recibir asistencia técnica, recibir cooperación y también algo muy importante, tener el suficiente tiempo, gozar de los plazos que nuestros sistemas necesitan para reordenarse de cara al cumplimiento de estas nuevas regulaciones internacionales. Un ejemplo que vemos que ha surgido desde aquí, desde el seno de la OMC, que ya incluye una visión desde nuestra perspectiva más moderna, más actualizada, es el Acuerdo de Facilitación de Comercio, y es que ahí se subrayan y se enfatizan estos temas de trato especial y diferenciado, porque se busca acomodar el marco general a la aplicación que cada uno de los países pueda dar. Y desde nuestra perspectiva, ese es un enfoque correcto que a pequeñas economías, a países en desarrollo, definitivamente nos ayuda siempre con la visión de poder cumplir los compromisos que, como cualquier otro de los Estados miembros de la OMC, tenemos ante una organización multilateral y sobre todo que tenemos con el mismo sistema multilateral de comercio. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Hector. I find it very impressive again what we've seen in Guatemala in the textile and apparel sector, and I find it interesting that you highlight the trade facilitation agreement as a mechanism to implement the notion of special and differential treatment through transitional periods, technical assistance and capacity building, tailored specifically for each country, so that each country will then be in a position to fully apply the disciplines of the agreement. So that's a very important notion here. So thank you very much for your comments. So let me turn now to you, Indermit. The World Bank recently released its World Development Report of this year, focused on the topic of the middle income trap. this is, of course, a topic that is very close to your heart and your mind because you've been working on this, and you're actually, I would say, maybe the inventor of the concept of middle-income trap. And this is important because according to the report, there are over 100 countries that are facing significant challenges in escaping the middle-income trap. And this is not unimportant. These are countries that are home to 6 billion people across the world. So trying to understand how to escape the middle-income trap is very important for the globe as such. Now, the report enters into a lot of detail and analysis, proposing a sophisticated mix of policies on investment, infusion, and innovation, depending on the level of development of countries. But today, I would like to ask you your insights on the role that trade and investment play in helping countries overcome the middle-income trap. And also, how do you view the role of special and differential treatment as a mechanism to help developing countries promote trade-related policies, again, to escape this middle-income trap?
Okay, got it. Thank you. Those are two very difficult questions. But
You're very well positioned to answer them.
So I'm going to tell you, basically when we started to work on this World Development Report, the one that we just did, we started with a very optimistic view of how things had been going, especially between 1990 and 2015. Because those were the golden years of economic development, so we said, okay, let's take a look at what happened then. There was a lot of progress. A lot of low-income countries became middle-income economies and so on. And if I had to attribute what the three big ingredients of that, I would say the first one would be macro stability. There was a general consensus that low inflation is better than high inflation, balanced budgets are better than big deficits, and low levels of debt are better than high levels of debt, okay? So I'm saying that all of this was the consensus between the late 80s, maybe even the early 90s, till about the mid-2010s, right, around 2015. Things have frayed since then. The second one, the first big pillar was macro stability. The second big pillar was investment climate, especially the investment climate for private enterprise. So this meant balanced regulations, this meant good competition regimes, and this meant hard budgets for state-owned enterprises so that private enterprises could actually compete with them on relatively equal terms, okay? And that led to, the third thing, of course, just these two, by the way, just macro stability and investment climate leads to a big supply response, right? And it did. But what was necessary for that supply response to be sustained and for that supply response to be met by demand was international trade, okay? So this was in goods, this was in services, and this was through FDI. These are to my mind, these are the three pillars of the progress that the world saw between 1990 and 2015. And I think that what that led to was a massive reduction of poverty. It led to a lot of countries that were low-income countries. They became middle-income countries. I think these things are necessary for countries to escape the middle-income trap. But they are not sufficient. Because at the same time, if you look at those same years, Annabelle, between 1990 and today, 34 middle-income countries have become high income. That doesn't look bad, because you say 34 countries in 34 years, Ngozi. That's one per year. That's not a bad. But then you add up the population of these countries, and it adds up to 250 million. So if you add up all of that stuff, it's kind of like saying that Pakistan, that the sum total of the achievement of the world was that Pakistan went from middle income to high income. And that would make a lot of people happy, maybe not Indians, but it would make a lot of people happy. But it should not satisfy us, because that's not a big achievement, right? So then you say, okay, so that's one observation. The second observation is, if you look at the per capita income of the median middle income country, it is about 10 to 15%, now depending on how you measure it, okay? But if you measure it that way, it was 10 to 15% in 1970 as well. 10 to 15% of US per capita income, okay? So the median middle income country has not caught up to the US at all since 1970, okay? As we started to look at this, we started to sort of find that, look, actually the situation for middle income countries is not very good. And then, fast forward from 2015 to now, you actually find that things are worse today, or the prospects for these countries are actually worse. They're growing into shrinking spaces. They're growing into shrinking spaces at home because of demography. They're growing into shrinking spaces internationally because of all of these trade tensions, fragmentation, etc. And they're growing into shrinking spaces when it comes to the energy transition, because we are actually creating a huge cost on the planet from the old strategy. The strategies that help the high-income countries of today and so on are not necessarily the same ones that we can do. So that's what the World Development Report tries to tackle. It looks at enterprise, it looks at the domestic aspects of socioeconomic mobility, and it looks at the third part, it looks at the energy transition. And if you look at it, I won't tell you more, but if you go on the website and so on, you'll find that it actually comes out in a very different place than where you might actually think. And largely it is because the main problem with middle-income countries is that they have fewer resources. That's a problem. But the bigger problem is that even the resources that they have, they use less efficiently than high-income economies. And so the whole report is really about becoming more efficient, Do you want me to talk also about the special and differentiated part? Okay, I don't think you like my answer. Okay.
We'll see.
Okay. So I'm looking at that and say, all right, so 2/3 of WTO members consider themselves developing economies, right? Now, I'll just give you some stats now. If you look at the 4 largest banks in the world, they're Chinese. Okay? You have to add up the largest 10 banks in the US to get to the same, to the same level of assets as these 4 Chinese banks. Okay? So that's the first part. Second one, nearly half of all manufacturing of the world is done in China. Okay? Third one is that China, of course, is the biggest exporter of goods, and it's going to become a very big exporter of services as well. 12 of the largest 100 companies in the world are Chinese. This makes China different from the typical developing economy. Okay? Now, I think that, and by the way, in a few years, China will be classified as a high-income economy by the United States, by the World Bank, right? Which means that it'll go up above $15,000 per capita. Now, South Korea has a per capita income of $35,000, and I think it still calls itself a developing economy, right? This is like the international Peter Pan syndrome, okay? These countries don't want to grow up, okay? Now, I think that this Peter Pan syndrome weakens the WTO, and it doesn't help China, and it doesn't help the EU, and it doesn't help the United States. That's not good. What's bad, of course, is that it hurts countries like India, like Indonesia, like South Africa and Nigeria. It hurts them. That's bad. What's even worse is that it really harms countries, smaller developing economies like Guatemala, like Guyana, and so on. Okay? So I think that the WTO has to change the special and differentiated. I know that the WTO can't do it by itself, but I think the world has to do it. And I think one way to go about it is to have something like the World Bank's 4-way classification into low, lower middle, upper middle, and high. I would actually suggest that there should be an even greater distinction, at least among the higher economy, the high-income countries, into at least 2 categories, so that China and Chile get classified differently from, let's say, Canada and Germany. Okay? Now, that will be a start, but it won't be enough. Okay? So I tell you why it won't be enough, and then I shut up. It won't be enough because the framers of the post-war international economic governance structures knew that a strong WTO would need a strong IMF and it would need a strong World Bank. That's why they thought of three institutions. These are the three Bretton Woods institutions. And I don't know why people have gone from 3 Bretton Woods institutions to 2 Bretton Woods institutions. It should be 3, okay? Now, let's take a look at the problem that we have today, okay? And I'll give you just one example of this, and I'll use China again, okay? If you look at what happened with the exchange rates in China after China joined the WTO, which was a very good thing that it joined the WTO. But what happened after that was, if you take a look at what happened to exchange rates, and I'm going to quote here, I'll tell you, we are just looking very closely at this now. So actually, Michael Musa, who used to be chief counselor at the IMF, he basically said that China's massive sterilized interventions, which went to nearly $500 billion in 2007, right? It prevented the nominal and real appreciation of the renminbi and thus facilitated the growing current account surpluses, amounting to a violation of China's obligations under IMF articles not to manipulate its exchange rate. The IMF did not do its job at that point, okay? Now, the IMF was not the only person, the only institution to blame. You know, at the same time, the use of subsidies and so on, we know that also leads to uncompetitive practices. Well, the World Bank should have been looking at that much more. Instead of looking at this carefully and advising China and so on, we were cheerleading. We were talking about China's great performances in poverty reduction and so on, but we did not do our job. We did not also say there are these dangers of muddling private and public resources, okay? And I think, so if I had to sort of say this again, the IMF and the World Bank didn't do their jobs, and as a result of it, countries like the United States, in a very short period during the time of that undervaluation of the Chinese currency, lost 2.5 million jobs. So you say it's a big country, 2.5 million jobs, not a big deal. And of course, but 2.5 million jobs in a very short period is a tough thing for any economy to handle. And by the way, these things were very concentrated in a few states. So look at the news today and so on and say, which are the battleground states till today? You talk about Pennsylvania, you talk about Michigan, you talk about Wisconsin, you talk about Illinois. These jobs were concentrated there. These have global repercussions, all of these things, right? So again, I think the WTO is being scapegoated because but I think all 3 Bretton Woods institutions have one-third share. Okay?
I'm glad to hear that the WTO only carries 1/3. Let me thank you, Enda. That's a fantastic contribution. I want to maybe highlight 3 points of what you said. One is that there is consistency with the main messages of the World Development Report of the World Bank and the recently launched World Trade Report of the WTO, in that trade and open markets are important, but they are not enough. Domestic policies are key. And you go into a lot of detail in your report. Second is this call to liberate Peter Pan that you made. I've never sort of heard that before, but I think you're basically saying let Peter Pan grow, but also open up space for others as well. And the third point that I find very interesting is also your call for reforming the institutions of the Bretton Woods system so that they can adjust better to our times. A point that I see in Ngozi, maybe you want to come in as well now. I'm going to put the spotlight on you because you have been making this point in particular, of course, in the case of the WTO. But I think Intermit presents this in a very interesting way because it talks about the consistency, the coherence between the 3 institutions of the system, and how if one doesn't work very well, then it can have impact in other places, and then it sort of leads into other implications. So you want to come in?
Indemit has been so brilliant. I hesitate to comment, but Annabelle, you really captured it. What we've been trying to say is that, yes, the one-third, 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 thank you, we share, but very often macroeconomic policies lead to certain conditions that are then blamed on trade completely. So trade, this is the point I've been trying to make. And I do not believe that both finance ministers and, other economists have paid adequate attention to this. And this is the point that Indemit is trying to make. Exchange rate issues that lead to current account deficits are often blamed. I don't want to be too inside baseball here, but, trade is often blamed for those things. And it's not completely responsible. So it's very important to tease this out. So yes, carry some blame, but not all of it. And I think we need to work together. That's why the coherence mandate of the three Bretton Woods institutions is very, very important. And this point Indemit made, that the three organizations were created to work together for some reason. But for whatever reason, the rest of the world has forgotten that WTO is a Bretton Woods institution, and they only talk of the World Bank and the IMF, which leads to disconnect. We are reconnecting, and that's why Indemit is here, and I'm very grateful for that, because I think we can serve the world better, working together on these very issues. So thank you very much. Just complimenting that when jobs were lost in those things, you're precisely right. We needed governments to have active labor market policies. Trade alone, or even the macro policies alone, cannot solve these problems. And this was foreseen. Secondly, they also needed to look at the services sector, where other types of service trade jobs were being created. I rest my case. I love this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I see a number of you nodding in the audience, and I think you probably want to come in. Before I go back to our esteemed panel here, let me see if there are any questions from the audience. Yeah, I see more than I thought. So let's start here, 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll try to see if we can squeeze another round. Please come in, and please introduce yourself as well, very shortly.
Alev Mine of the One Goal Initiative for Governance. I wanted to ask if there is a process where the impact of digitalization on geopolitics in relation to trade is discussed or can be discussed, because there are two aspects to this. On the one hand, the process of digitalization changes the operational setting whereby it sets up a situation that will change future potential conflicts. And secondly, AI, somebody mentioned AI, has the impact that it raises mining needs, and mining needs raise conflicts, and then conflicts raise the need to use AI for defense, etc. So that we have a cycle there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Preetham Banerjee from the Center for WTO Studies. Going to Indermit's point, the China effect on developing country industries and exports were being felt since 2005, 6, 7 onwards. But this whole admission that drivers were asleep at the wheel is of much recent, origin. So my question is there an institutional bias in the Bretton Woods organizations that only wakes up when the rich countries get impacted, and the developing countries, when they are impacted, pretty much people remain asleep at the wheel? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great question. We have another question on this side of the room, please.
Thank you. My name is Emmanuel Wachendo from the Institute of Economic Affairs Kenya, a think tank. And my question is, what can we as policy analysts from all over the world do when we can see that certain countries, whether they're big or small, but especially the small ones, are pursuing really ill-advised fiscal and monetary policy. Maybe the worst effects will be isolated to them, but as people who are speaking as though we have a global interest and an interest in global welfare, can we actually start to be more, maybe I should use the word aggressive, about putting pressure in the same way that the guys across the street in the United Nations will do when human rights are being violated? So can we also see that we have, maybe, do we have a responsibility there too? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some tough questions here. So I want to start and seeing whether anyone from on the panel here on my right side would like to address any one of these issues, the relationship between digital and geopolitics to trade. We, of course, see this in the organization, or whether you would like to address this issue of any institutional bias in the Bretton Woods system, and maybe I'll come to you, Indermit. And also, so how to make countries behave better from a macroeconomic perspective. So that's also a complicated question. So maybe I'll turn it over to you, Indermit.
Yeah, so I think there is this, I think Preetam makes a good point about this. The observation that I had when I left the World Bank for 5 years and I was teaching was that I found that when I came back, I found that the World Bank does very well during crises. Right? So for example, so I came back during the COVID crisis, and I remembered how the World Bank had responded during the 2008 global financial crisis. It has a sense of urgency and really has I think it moves all the right levers and it moves it quickly and so on. But the other thought that I had was the sense of urgency or the sense of crisis at places like the World Bank and the IMF appeared to be more the case when there's a crisis in the United States, okay? So it has to be around there, you know? So that's really, I think that's really, that really I would say would be the institutional quote unquote flaw there, right? So then you say, okay, what's the cure for this, right? So because I'm from a middle-income country, because I'm from a developing country, you first have to see whether or not the fault lies in ourselves before you start to blame the US and the EU and others. And I actually find that until recently, middle-income countries were very passive. I don't know if this was your experience when you were at the World Bank or your experience when you were at the IDB, that they're actually very, very passive, okay? They tend to wait for high-income economies to take the lead on issues, even on issues that will affect them much, much more. And then when they do become active, their first instinct is, you know what, I'm going to set up my own bank. I don't like this World Bank. But you're a member of the World Bank. And you're going to become a more and more important member of the World Bank as your share in global trade, global financial flows, global economic output grows, will only become more important. So it's much better to actually try to sort of see how does one exercise voice in the system rather than exercising exit. Maybe you need to exercise exit, but the time is not now, okay? Right now, the time is to exercise voice. So I think that's what I would sort of say. That is something that is in the control of governments of India, governments of... And by the way, I can break this down into many, many smaller steps, but I think that then we are starting to get too inside the institution and so on. Yeah. But I take Preetham's point that I think that these organizations were asleep at the switch.
So, you know, one point that was made in another panel that I participated in was the rise of third nations, in the sense of, certainly here in the WTO, making a call for greater proactivity on the part of many developing countries to actually take the lead in addressing some of the challenges that we are confronting. Let me check here with our panel. Yes, please, Hector, then Ambassador. And then I'll also come to you, Minister, if you have to share some thoughts with us. So, Hector.
Thank you, Annabel. Probably to try to well, not answer, but to share some experiences to the third question about how aggressive we could, or how aggressive we should be or not be in terms of making governments behave better in terms of macroeconomics. And for this, I would like to share the experience of Guatemala. And the Monetary Board, which is an official board, it's an advisory group for the government of Guatemala, we have permanent seats for private sector representatives. And it is common that we invite people from civil society, think tanks, to share studies, reports, share their ideas on how the country should be looking outside of itself and looking to the world as to define public policy. So, for me, I think that that's a good example of how you can actually try to articulate different parts of society in order to make public policy, and you give a permanent space to a key actor in your policy development work, and you also invite others to share their views and their experiences. And for us, that has worked, and that's why one of the reasons why Guatemala actually can praise itself of having a good macroeconomic behavior along history. Thank you.
That is true, that Guatemala is a country that has one of the most recognized sort of macroeconomic environment over the years. Now, another point I think that is also relevant, and certainly in the context of the WTO, is the role of rules in anchoring reforms in countries. Because we know here that certainly a number of trade rules that are in the trade agreements here at the WTO can help countries, one, drive reforms in their own economies, but two, also make sure that those reforms are sustained over time. Sustaining over time some of these reforms, I'm sure if we go back to the report by Indermit, consistency over time of good policies is, of course, something that is very relevant. So, Ambassador, you want to come in?
Thank you so much. Regarding this question on the policy analysis, particularly with regard to the monetary and fiscal policy, of course, it is the usual practice that in most countries, taking into cognizance of the monetary and fiscal policy, there must be a huge consultations with the stakeholders, so that the public policy in these two areas must be in tandem with the practical realities, so that when the monetary policy is in place, the fiscal policy is in place. In fact, these are elements that trade cannot grow in any country without the sound two policies in place, as well as the trading partners of any country will have to critically look into those policies and ensure that they are business friendly and there is no hiccups in terms of that. So therefore, it is important really every public, government will have to do that huge consultations to ensure that even if there are challenges, of course, that will affect trade in those areas, really taken into consideration. Now, on geopolitical tension, which I participated in few meetings in this forum where, of course, those issues were discussed, and the effects of what is going on as a result of those geopolitical tensions to trade had been holistically discussed here. Now, that's where the importance of the digital trade comes in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when there are tensions, of course, physical presence is really impossible. But with the digital trade, now that I think some of the negative consequences of those tensions will be reduced drastically. And of course, that's when I can say it's encouraging that digital trade should really be improved, so that whether there is tension or no tension, the digital trade is a practical reality globally now. So it must have to be enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just to close our panel, let me just ask each of our participants a final question, which is, what would you prioritize in the evolving WTO framework to better connect this link between trade and development? Is it digital trade rules in the digital trade area, as we've heard from Adamu? Is it more investment facilitation? Is it better rules in agriculture? What areas do you think are a priority to further strengthen the link between trade and development from the perspective of developing countries? Let me maybe start with you, Onesh, a quick final comment, and I'll work my way until I get to Indermit.
Yes, thank you very much for that insightful question. Given my responsibilities for small and medium and micro enterprises, it's crucial, in my view, to empower MSMEs with the necessary tools and resources to ensure that their products can enter the market successfully and sustainably. Providing targeted support, including technical training, access to finance, and other resources, is essential for enabling MSMEs to effectively compete in the global markets. This approach not only strengthens enterprises, but ensures that the benefits of trade reach to the grassroots level. And as government, that we're particularly concerned with that. Also, youth and indigenous groups must be included in the development agenda of countries. These groups are often overlooked. However, these groups can provide a unique perspective and skills that can drive economic growth and innovation. By creating this enabling environment, it encourages active participation in trade. We can ensure that future generations have the tools to thrive, contributing to sustainable economic development. Also, I recommend the implementation of the critical agreements and speeding up of negotiations toward outcomes like those expected at the 13th Ministerial Conference of the WTO. And this is critical to ensuring that we move from commitments to concrete actions. All in all, providing targeted capacity building, improving inclusivity in decision-making, and empowering marginalized groups are vital, in my view, to strengthening the multilateral system for all while ensuring that no country is left behind.
Thank you very much, Minister. Sounds very much to me like the reglobalization agenda that we have been discussing these days. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I think one of the key priorities as far as developing countries is concerned, and particularly Africa and Nigeria, is one, to foster technology transfer and access to new technology. Because as we have been discussing on digital trade, of course, digital trade cannot be effective if there is no real connectivity, electricity, and few other things that are very necessary. So it is a priority to us, the developing world, and Africa and Nigeria, to ensure that that issue of transfer of technology from those who are advanced already in the technology to be able to transfer those kind of technologies to the developing world so that they can as well be equipped, they can as well have the capacity to improve their trade and development. Now, the provision of policy space and support to digital industrialization. As most of the participants may recall, the African group in the WTO made a proposal in the WTO that it is high time we come and discuss on the issue of real industrialization policies, because there is a huge disparity in terms of those policies, that which, of course, the developing countries are seeing it as if it's a key issue that is causing a kind of underdevelopment. So those needs to be holistically discussed and agreed so that the developing world can as well have space to utilize, to come up with their policies that will at least pave way for their development. Now, then the flexibility rules for developing countries. You know, we are talking of joint initiatives here. the e-commerce, investment facilitation for development, MISMIS, and of course, domestic services regulations. So in those areas, we are saying that the developing countries should be able to have some flexibilities to air their own peculiar situation, their own interests, so that it will be reflected in accordance with their own level of development. You know, like the previous agreement where things are taking place or took place, and then the provision of S&DT were there, but still not implementable. So since there's room now for clear negotiation or discussion to bring in some policies on board, then those areas need to be really given a priority to the developing countries, so that at least their peculiarity on trade, on development, and other issues will be taken on board. Now, precise and effective provision for technical assistance and capacity building, like the Honorable Minister mentioned. You know, our forefathers who negotiated the GATT, which metamorphosed into the World Trade Organization that we are in today, of course, took cognizance of the fact that the world or members of that organization don't have equal in terms of everything. So therefore, they now made a provision for special and differential treatment. And they said it must be part or an integral part of every aspect of the WTO issues. So therefore, that has been very clear, and it is still clear, even though ambiguities like the minister mentioned, where he brought in the issue of differentiation and so on and so forth. But well, it's an issue of discussion for another day, because we have been talking on that over time here. So, but for the fact that the WTO provision has made it clear that special and differential treatment is a right of the developing countries. So therefore, for that to change, to now consider the issue of differentiation, then it means negotiation need to also be done to change that provision.
Thank you.
So that's another aspect. Now, on the issue of, then in addition, measures to increase trade opportunities for developing countries is a priority to us.
Very good.
So some of these areas that I pinpointed are clearly priority that will give advantage to the developing countries, to Africa, and of course Nigeria, to take advantage of the global trade, and then to benefit from the global trade, to also develop through trade, because trade is an engine of growth. So therefore, we need to take advantage of this, but taking into consideration our key priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I want to take advantage of the opportunity that you mentioned, the digital divide, to say that at 1:30 in the atrium, we have a panel with regional development banks, including the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, World Bank, and others, to discuss how can this bank support infrastructure development, skills, and others, so that developing countries can leverage the benefits of digital trade. So just a small announcement on that. Hector.
Thank you, Annabelle. And I'm going to try to make it really short, quick, and straight to the point. I do believe that there are 3 points: targeted technical assistance, targeted capacity building, access to financing, and of course the opportunity to have access to new technology, and also to have the opportunity to develop some of our own technology, because that could better accommodate to our own needs. I would resume into that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sharp and quick. Indermit, you have the last word.
Short. You asked what should the WTO keep in mind, I think. I would say 3 things, probably equally important. The first one is how countries define themselves. I think this should not be unilateral. This should be multilateral. It should not be a unilateral decision, right? So that's the first one. The second one is, I think, to look out for, in terms of if you really want to look out for the interests of like 3/4 of the world, I would say be very vigilant about protectionism disguised as environmentalism. okay? Because it's a very difficult thing for each country to counter, each of the poorer countries to counter. You need the WTO to actually take a very, very hard look on this one and not just jump on the climate action wagon, but to actually sort of see where is it being used as the fig leaf for something that's not so benign. And the last thing in terms of what should you focus on at the WTO, or what should the WTO focus on, I would say services, the services trade. This is the next big thing. Actually, it's already the big thing.
Okay.
So I would say make sure that you get that right so that we don't make some of the mistakes that we made on the goods trade.
Very good, Indermit. I won't pretend to summarize all the good things that have been said in this panel. Just want to conclude by asking all of you to thank all of our panelists and give them a round of applause. Thank you.